With the government in the midst of gathering input on the formulation of the political financing bill, we take a look at the key issues and challenges surrounding this legislation. We speak to University of Nottingham Malaysia's Associate Professor of Practice, Dr. Tricia Yeoh, about what could possibly hinder the bill's passage.
The idea behind a political financing bill is to ensure that there is transparency, because transparency is what will allow there to be some light shed on where the movements of monies are going into the political parties. What goes out of political parties, that would not necessarily be covered under the political financing bill, because we're talking about the financing of political parties per se, how the money flows into the parties. Now, the transparency threshold, that can be debated, right? So we can, for example, determine with policymakers and parties on what levels they're comfortable with. If we are looking at a higher threshold, that means that only donors above a certain amount will be named transparently in a sort of report. And if we look at the lower threshold, it means that, again, the lower the bar is, even if you contribute a small amount of money, then your name as a donor will come out in this report. Now, who gets this report? So this comes to the second question about which is the body, the regulatory body that will be running and overseeing the entire process. Ideally, and what is being proposed by the APPG, or the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Political Financing, is that it's an independent body that is separate from Parliament, separate from the executive, but of course ensuring that members are selected based on their capabilities, based on their professional affiliations. And then this body would have to be very, very discreet, right? Because they might be receiving reports from the political party, and then they will decide what will then be tabled to Parliament. So you would expect that what's tabled to Parliament, it therefore becomes a public document. Now, the third point would be discussions over whether there is going to be public funding. Public funding meaning the state or the government itself issues some proportion of funds to each political party based on the percentage of what each party occupies in Parliament. Public funding is not new. It's a practice that many countries, many jurisdictions around the world already have. And public funding allows the political system to stabilize, and you have a reduced sort of, Malaysia has experience with a lot of this party hopping or coalition hopping. So to stabilize the political system, providing public funding allows the parties to have some minimum amount of funding to begin with, so that the parties don't have to depend on other sources, for example, corporate funding or individual donor funding, which you can imagine is going to be possibly compromising of the party's values, ideals, and also actions, especially if the party is in a position of power where it can determine who can receive licenses and contracts and tenders and so on. So that's the third issue, public funding.
Now, Tricia acknowledges the strong resistance to political reform, but emphasizes that legislative measures are crucial in preventing future scandals like 1MDB.
In the recent years, we have seen examples of 1MDB as a huge international issue that negatively reported on Malaysia in so many multiple ways. The story that we want to tell the public and the policymakers and politicians as well is that if we don't want a repeat of an incident as bad as 1MDB that gave such negative international reputation to Malaysia, which also impacted on our economy, impacted on the ability of investors to see Malaysia as a stable place within which to operate, then we also need to be able to show that these laws are being enacted to ensure that our institutions are robust enough to catch whenever there is a potential 1MDB taking place again. We know that political parties need funds to operate, which is why we want that a system, a regulatory system is put in place to allow for that and create the parameters around which the parties can still function, can still flourish, and can still operate, because we want the parties to still contribute to our parliamentary democracy. The legislation, we hope, will do that.